Well, the only problem I have, but I am only seeing 4 of you guys at
Right.
any one time. Despite that Google extension that says grid view, I keep touching it and it's not doing a darn thing. So
Same
Is
here.
it crossed off, or does it have a slide X for it?
it has a box where I could check it, and when I check it, it doesn't do anything different.
Okay, hit refresh up in the top.
On like my browser refresh?
Here, click your browser refresh. It'll kick you out for a second. And it should bring you back in.
Should.
Okay, she's brought in muted. And now, right next to participants, you should have the grid box. And that should be a toggle that you can toggle on and off. And you're muted.
There we go. Better. I'm back. No, I don't. I have the chat box. I have the participant window. But so maybe Dave, you can let me know until I figure that out.
Yeah, you bet. I'll help manage that. If I see somebody waving, I'll bring it to your attention. Okay, Tammy?
Okay, that sounds good. All right, so we're at 7 o'clock, and since we're all here, we could call the meeting to order. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Hearing none, we will go. I would need a motion, and this is the other thing, is when you speak, can you say who you are so Anne can make a record of that? So I need a motion to approve the minutes from March 4th, please.
And remember to unmute yourself if you speak, please.
Bjorn Berendt, so moved.
Thank you, BJ. Is there a second? Anyone? Please unmute yourself.
Try something or not. No, I can't.
I'll second Andy.
Thank you, Andy. Okay. And then all those in favor of approving the minutes, and we'll go through. So Andy, since you're unmuted, why don't you vote?
Aye.
Thank you. BJ?
Aye.
Maria? Unmute.
Aye.
Thanks. Len?
Aye.
Get it some other time.
George?
Yeah, aye.
Doug? Unmute, Doug. Are you there, Doug?
He may be trying to figure out how to unmute.
Okay, so we'll go.
I don't see him anymore.
Okay.
I see his phone indicated. Yeah, I know he's out there.
Okay,
Oh,
we'll
I'm
come back
there
to
you
him. Adrian? Are you there? You have to unmute.
Adrian, hover over your picture and a little microphone will
Yeah.
come up. You can click on.
Will we figure out technically how to unmute? How about John?
Aye.
Thank you. Adrian, can you unmute? Can you unmute her, Dave? Or no?
I am not allowed to unmute someone. I can just mute them.
What power?
I don't know if that's a good superpower or not. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Hi,
We've got
can you hear
Adrian.
me?
Yes.
Yes, now we can. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, it's gone on twice and then it unmutes or it mutes itself again. I'm fine. Yes.
Okay. Is Doug there? Doug, can you hear us? Can we hear you? Unmute yourself, please, if you'd like to vote. Not hearing Doug. For right now, we will have Doug has abstained for right now. How's that? Since we can't hear from him, so we can move on. Anne, do we have any public input or announcements?
Anna's shaking her head. No, we do not.
Okay, hearing none, we will move on. So, Dave, do you want to give us the superintendent update for the board, which is item 5?
Yes, thank you. So first, hello to everyone. It's good to see you, even though we're not in
Hey,
person.
David,
Yes,
sorry
sir.
to interrupt, but I do have a member of the public that just texted me asking how to connect publicly to
All
watch
right.
this live.
Oh,
I'm
what is
quickly.
it live?
Is this going live? I don't know if Brian's.
Yes. So the way to watch it live is through YouTube, which is at the top of the agenda, BJ.
Okay.
If you find the agenda that was sent out, there's a link to the
Yep.
live YouTube feed. Are you good with that?
Yeah. How was that sent out to the public? Out of curiosity.
It was sent out to our normal list of public that receives the agendas, and it was warned on the website like it normally is.
Okay, that link's not on the website, is it?
It should be on the website with the agenda that's posted on the website.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Cool. You bet.
Oh, no problem. I expect that we will have many different challenges as we navigate this process. So,
Yeah, we'll probably get good at this right about the time normalcy maybe returns. But thanks to everyone. I sent you a long report just as a point of reference yesterday. Wanted to give you an update on kind of what the last few weeks for us have looked like, as well as draw your attention to specifically the continuity of learning plan that we submitted to the state. We are going to be putting that plan on our website after this meeting, just so that it's accessible there. That's not necessarily something that many people will be interested in consuming, but we do want to have it available, through that venue. Also wanted to make sure that you had kind of just a simple narrative from each school about what's going well and what the challenges are right now in each of our school settings. I think it's important that the board knows that we've worked really hard to make sure that we are trying to create balance for families and for educators. We're trying to be responsive to what we hear from people in terms of what's working and what's not working well. We are finding it nearly impossible to meet the needs of all parties in the process because everyone's needs are so divergent and unique right now, even though we all have this shared experience. But I really just wanted you to have kind of a sense on what some of the school play-by-plays look like. And I did ask Tyler, just as the principal of the largest school, I asked him if he would join us tonight, just in case you have any questions about how things are going at Mill River. And then finally, at the end of my report, I address what we know will be the coming fiscal pressures that are going to come on the back end of this. Some of the things I shared for you already is that the state's projecting a $40 million deficit in the ed fund for this particular school year. How that plays out and what stimulus looks like for that, we don't yet know. And there's no way to know yet what that looks like for next year. Stan and Tammy and I are participating in a webinar for board chairs, business managers, and superintendents tomorrow morning. That is supposed to be a forecast from the Joint Fiscal Office. So we'll have a better sense on some of the thoughts that they're having. Current status as of tomorrow, but right now, this is about as much as we know. We're anticipating things will be incredibly rough, but we don't know what that means from a numbers standpoint. And related to that, there's a couple other linked items that I shared with you in the report that are tied to future actions that I'm asking for later in this agenda. One is about staffing recommendations. I'd like to ask for some conversation and possibly a stance from the board on that. And then proposal for the end of the school year that I'd like to talk to you about as well. So the final thing I want to share just on the report, sorry, my computer's going nuts. I do think it's important to share with the board publicly that our central office staff and our administrative staff decided to take the proactive measure to agree to forego their scheduled raises for next year. All those folks were budgeted for 3% increases to their salaries, but everyone realizing what's going on with the school district at the moment, what's going on with the world at the moment, even though people had signed contracts that said one thing, those folks expressed that they are willing to set that aside and wait to see what happens with negotiations with teachers. And everyone realizes there's some inherent risk in that. There's risk that flat 0% could be a reality that we're all facing, depending on what the the state's dynamics are in terms of the ed fund. So I just want to acknowledge those two groups of folks for taking that stance. I think it's an important real step, but it's an important just step of kind of commitment to the district and the rest of the folks we're working with that I wanted you to be aware of. That said, I will gladly entertain any questions that you might have. I can actually see everyone on the screen. So Tammy, if it's okay with you, if I just see a hand, I'll call on folks and work through it that way. Is that all right?
That would be fine. Mhm.
Excellent. Andy, I see you've got a question. Yes, sir.
You have to unmute yourself, Andy.
He's working on it. He's working on it. He's still working. Don't worry. Andy, I'll tell you what. I'll go. Oh, there you are. You're
Got
good.
it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Can I join the webinar tomorrow morning?
Yeah, we can figure that out. After this meeting is over, please don't let me forget, and I'll send you the sign up link for that so that we can
Great.
get you patched in. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just as a quick thing, this is Adrienne. The VSBA may have sent a link. I know I got one this afternoon to join that webinar.
I did
can,
too.
yeah. So I don't know if they sent it to all members or just to the representatives to the VSBA, but I could send it on to Andy.
That's great, Adrian. If you don't mind doing
Okay.
that, that's wonderful.
All right. Because I signed up too.
I see George has a question. Yes, sir.
First, a quick comment. I want to thank you for your statement on folks that are willing to stay at current status. You and your staff, congratulations for taking that step. The question I had is in your information that came out yesterday. I know you're going to talk about it a little bit later, but there was something about bus driver stuff, if you recall. And I would like to make sure that that we give careful consideration to that item if we're going to be in need of bus drivers. I mean, we don't know where we're going to be, but
Yes, sir. That's a very good point. One that I wanted to bring up with the board for discussion. I know that Gary has some perspective and insight that he'd like to share on that as well. But thanks for previewing that, George. Len, I see your hand. Yes, sir.
Yep. Just a quick question following up on George's. We're going to go into more detail on the specifics in your plan that you brought forward, right? That'll come up later.
Yes, on the agenda item a little bit down the agenda. I plan to talk more about that. Yes.
I don't have the agenda in front of me, so I just double checking. Thank you.
Understood. Any other questions just on status report?
Do you want to then go into your end of the year proposal? If nobody else has any questions, Dave?
Yes. Is that our next agenda? It sure is. Okay. Yeah. So at the bottom of that report is an end of the school year proposal that I shared with you. And just because we're on camera, I will read through the gist of this proposal for you, even though I know that some of you have this in front of you. So basically, the Agency of Education, they've come down and said that even in the state that we're currently in, that schools should follow their school year calendars for the remainder of the year. So what that means is we've got an April break coming up next week. Obviously, you've seen communication from me to staff and families about that. And with our snow days that we had this year, our last day of student and staff attendance would have been scheduled to be Tuesday, the 16th of June. More background for you. Our school calendar has 177 student days, 185 teacher days. We are only required by state law to have students in class for 175 days. It's important for you to know, and this is not in the proposal I gave you, all of the days missed in the early stages, those have been granted waivers and have been counted as school days by the state. So we, in essence, have not lost any more school days, even with the COVID-19 scenario, because we're still delivering school services. It's still considered being in school. My recommendation to the board that I'd like to ask for you to land on one way or the other is I'd like to ask for permission to waive 2 of those days of student attendance, which would take our student total from 177 down to 175. The reason I make that request is rather than finishing the school year for students on a Tuesday, it seems more logical to me to allow them to finish the student school year on Friday, the 12th of June, and just have a clean wrap before that weekend begins. The only dilemma that would create is that we would have staff members that would still technically owe the district 2 days in terms of meeting their overall objective. And you may recall we had a scenario kind of like this a couple of years ago where we had an extraordinary number of snow days that were pushing us really deep into June. And we made an accommodation where we adjusted the student schedule and we allowed folks to use some leave time in order to, not have to be around as late because the school year was ending when it was. So I would ask for the board to consider giving me the discretion to work with staff members in that way if that were the case. So the theoretical would be moving the student school year end to Friday, June 12th. The official staff end would be Tuesday, June 16th. But if staff had their work done, allowing staff to use leave time for that Monday and Tuesday in June, only if their work was done. So the ultimate action that I'd be requesting, I just tried to word that for the board if the board wanted to take action. And that is at the bottom of the document. It says the requested motion will be that the board forgive 2 student days for the 2019-2020 school year in accordance with the 175-day minimum set by state statute. Additionally, the superintendent shall have discretion to allow teachers and support staff to utilize accrued leave time or future accrued leave time, realizing some folks may be near the bottom of the barrel in terms of days that they have available to them for those last 2 scheduled days of staff attendance, with the understanding that all end of year obligations must have been met by any employee choosing to utilize leave time for this purpose. So with that, I'll pause and I'll take questions. I see BJ has
Well,
a question.
Do you want a motion, Dave? Should we do a motion and then have discussion? If
Yeah,
George has his hand up?
procedurally, that could make sense that we have a motion in a second and then move to discussion if that works.
Okay.
So moved, George speaking.
Okay, and then BJ, did you second it?
I will second that.
Okay, thank you. So then discussion. So question, anyone?
BJ had a question. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we can make it also an option for teachers to, instead of just taking leave time, to take 2 days over this vacation. I'm just thinking, I know a lot of teachers need the vacation, but they also might be willing to work, will probably most likely be working over this break to prepare.
I understand what you're saying.
And if they still have two days, rather than saying, hey, you have to take leave time, if you are going to work over break, here's 2 days for you as an option.
If we were to do that, that is something that we could figure out and I could communicate effectively to staff if the board wanted to make that gesture. So just to kind of restate that, BJ saying rather than have people need to take their accumulated leave time at the end of the year, they could work 2 days during the course of this April break to make up for those days at the end of the year. Got it.
Does that
George
change the motion?
It could. Why don't we finish the conversation and we could see if the motion needs to change anymore? Is that, Tammy, is that okay with you?
That's fine. Let's have some discussion about it and then we can amend it if we need to before we vote.
George, you had a question.
I think BJ's suggestion is a good one. I would certainly be willing to amend the motion if we need to.
Thank you, George. Any other comments or questions on that end of year topic?
I have one question, Dave. Is there any talk out of Montpelier about minimizing the 175-day requirement by statute? Are there any talk coming out of the legislature or anything?
No, there were rumblings that who knows what will happen with the end of the school year. Would that be reduced? But then we got guidance from the agency early last week saying, nope, finish out your calendars. You need to stick to your local agreements and your local calendars and go with the days that are required. So I don't see anything changing with that at all.
Okay, fair enough. Len?
Len, yeah.
I don't mean to make this more complicated. When was graduation scheduled?
Second Wednesday in June, so that would be the 10th of June this year. So that would be a couple days before the proposed last day that I'm suggesting.
Right. does that matter in terms of if we set it at the 12th of June, which is 175 days for all students, that will be okay in terms of the seniors as well, because evidently they'll be going two more days than they would have originally been scheduled if graduation took place prior to that.
True. I guess the best response I could give to that is we haven't figured out plans for what a graduation event might look like, but there's no reason that celebration, if you will, that's probably not the right word, but there's no reason that still cannot be centered around Wednesday the 10th as kind of the target date for seniors. We could easily make that happen, whatever that's going to look like.
Yeah, and I just want to be mindful. Traditionally, seniors have gotten out early.
Yep.
And, in many instances don't meet the 175, but I don't want to go into that part.
Yeah, understood.
We won't go there. That's just the reality. And I would hope that we could make it clear to the seniors that, if we needed to do something around that earlier date, the 11th, that we would try to do that. I just throw that out there. I don't want to muddy the waters. I'm fine with the 175 days and the 12th of June. But I always sort of keep in mind the seniors.
Yeah, I think my response to that, Lennon, I'm guessing Tyler would agree, would be a lot of our traditions are unfortunately being severely affected right now, but that's one tradition that we can still uphold, which is, the seniors experience could end on that day very easily, the targeted day.
And again, it's not so much the graduation piece, because I know in many instances that's not going to happen, but just to be clear that we're going to ask all students to do 175 days, and I'm okay with that.
But we could have the exception for seniors without question. I guess that's what I want to be clear on. Tyler, I think, has something to add. Tyler?
Yeah, just typically, just for a point of clarification, that seniors' last day is the Friday before. Their last day of classes is that Friday before, and then they'd have their graduation practice on Monday, Tuesday, and graduation Wednesday. So just a point of clarification.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so George, would you like to amend the motion? And BJ, would you second the amended motion to reflect what we've just discussed?
Well, yeah, yes, I will amend to account for the BJ's suggestion.
And I will second it.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go through and ask everybody. I'll call the vote. So BJ, do you want to give me a vote, please?
Aye.
Thank you. Maria?
Aye.
Len?
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
George?
Yes, aye.
Doug?
I think we're still having mute issues with Doug, unfortunately, but he's still there, so I know he can hear us.
Okay. Adrian?
Aye.
And John?
Aye.
And that's the order that you guys kind of joined in that I wrote. So for the rest of the meeting, for anything we have to vote on, so you have an idea, I'll follow that same list because that's the way I have it written down. So that motion is passed, Dave.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone.
In thinking about the update and that, since Tyler is with us, could we let Tyler speak to what's going on at the high school? Because I know that several of us have had some parents contact us with questions, and maybe he can clarify some things. I know we've heard about the elementary schools with some examples of what they're doing, but maybe Tyler could give us a brief overview of how things are progressing in the high school, what a typical day is looking like, if that makes any sense now, since nothing's typical anymore.
Well, you kind of answered your own question right there, or own statement, is that nothing is typical. I mean, there is definitely a variety of delivery methods for our teachers. Some are more comfortable than others using technology. I will say that some of our teachers who I thought were really scared of technology and always referred to things as the computer have really risen to the occasion and really upped their ability technology-wise. So I mean, we still have a variety of teachers who are all online, with the exception of the kids who can't get online in their classes. And that in that case, they are doing more packet or paper and pencil activities or assignments. Where some are less online and more packet and pen and paper project type work. Um, our at first our we had a lot of I asked our teachers to send me. A lot of our teachers are doing some Google form surveys of their students to see how they're doing with everything on top of their regular education, if you will, or the instruction, just to see how the distance learning format is going. And at first, overwhelmingly, the kids all came back with, "I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed. This is far more work than I ever did in school, and please quit assigning things, please." And I was looking at some, and this is across the board. This is not middle school. It's not just high school. It's across the board. That has calmed down. I will say that definitely has calmed down as our teachers have kind of slowed down and realized what the expectation of kids is. And the expectation that we're going forward with is approximately 2 to 2.5 hours of work per class per week. Now, we all know that our kids are not going to sit down and do 7.5 hours of work while they're at home. That's not a reality that I think we can strive for. It's just not possible. So I think that 2 to 2.5 hours of work per class per week is very reasonable. And it's also in touch with all of the other schools in Rutland County. Stafford, Melissa Connor, the director of Stafford, just reached out to us yesterday to all the different schools and asked us what are our expectations of kids in terms of what are we doing, just so that Stafford is in line with us, so they're not going crazy and asking for them to do 7 hours of work per class per week, something like that. The range was 2 to 4 hours per class per week. So at us at 2.5 to it varies. I think we're right within range. There was only one school at 4 hours. Most were at that 2 to 3 hour range per class per week. I did have I would say a significant amount of parents reach out to me feeling extremely overwhelmed in the first 2 weeks of our instruction or our delivery of instruction, not being able to make heads or tails of anything. They just said that they're seeing all this work assigned and, they're worried with, what their kids are doing at home if the parent was lucky enough to be home, or also, if the parent's worried about losing their job or being laid off and all those other stressors, and the kids realizing that happening. So my instruction to our teachers over the last 2 weeks was really to slow down, stop doing things on a daily basis, and look at things in more of a modular weekly basis. So that there's obviously the students the teachers are checking in constantly. But in terms of what that delivery of instruction is more of a weekly focus. Here's your assignments for the week. I'm here to work with you and chat with you and help you through these assignments. But this is what our goal is for week 1, week 2. So that's been progressing. I have had some parents reach out to me, and just you saw in Dave's report that we did decide to press pause on new instruction for this week, the week of April 6th, just because we saw so many kids that were falling behind. That were missing. If you go into Google Classroom, you can see what assignments have been turned in and what are missing. You also, if you go into Power School, our grading software, you can see what is missing and what's incomplete. And I was alarmed just by the amount of assignments that were not turned in. So I wanted to be proactive and make sure our kids had that time to catch up, albeit there are some kids that are doing well with this and doing amazing, and they're doing everything that's expected of them, and they're flying. And what my directive to teachers were in that situation is to let them grow their learning, extend their learning in what they're already doing, not just give a busy work assignment, but some kind of enrichment activity or assignment that would extend their learning in what they're already doing. So an add-on that would enable them to, like I said, grow their learning. Again, I've had, I put out the email to parents. I talked with teachers on Saturday of what we were going to do for this week. I put my email out to parents on Sunday saying we're going to pause new instruction with the exception of AP classes and enrichment opportunities for kids who are caught up. And, I got a varied response from parents. Some parents were, my kids don't have enough to do. Some were, thank you. I had more thank yous than not. I did have one particular parent that had reached out to me a couple times with some very specific questions on what we were and were not doing. And I since got an email from this parent thanking me because now a lot of our teachers are now reaching out, giving these her children some more enrichment activities. So we're growing. This is something that we went to school on March 13th, knowing that something was coming down the pipes, but expecting to be at school on Monday, March 16th. There are things here that I know that we need to work with teachers, across the board, and for things I've been trying to do and work with teachers that we're getting better at. But now we're in a completely new environment where they're uncomfortable and learning. So I know that it was a long-winded, explanation of what we're doing, but I gotta say that we are learning. We are learning every day, and we are growing with our students, and they're growing with us. And is it perfect? It's not. I don't think there's anyone can say they're doing it perfectly right now. And I know that all high schools in this area are doing something completely different than one another. There is no similarities between what each school is doing. I know some are 100% online and some are 100% offline. So yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I'm sure I create some questions from that, and I'll be happy to answer those. But we're learning, we're growing, and yeah.
Okay, let's see if anyone, thank you. If anyone has any questions, can you see, Dave, if
Yep,
there's
I'll handle that. I see BJ's hand. Go ahead, sir.
I just wanted a question, and Dave, you could probably answer this for the elementary schools. What's the encouragement between synchronous versus asynchronous? Basically, video conferencing through education through video conferencing versus social just through video conferencing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I'll give you just the broader picture. And so for definition purposes for everybody, synchronous meaning everything's kind of happening at the same time, and asynchronous meaning that people can access learning or lessons at different times. BJ, what we're seeing realistically is our community needs us to be flexible with that. The concept of doing everything simultaneously. For example, me saying, hey, everyone, show up at 9 o'clock for your normal class that's at 9 o'clock, and I'm going to be on video presenting and you need to be there. That creates all kinds of issues in our households. It creates issues with places that don't have adequate internet access. It creates places where there are children competing for internet access and competing for the resource of a video cam to engage in that type of work. And we have those same issues, honestly, with our teachers who are also not only trying to teach their classes of kids, but they're also homeschooling their own children. So because of all of those dynamics that are in play, we have had to approach the synchronous and asynchronous in as balanced of a way as we can. And sometimes it's an individualized situation. For example, I heard of one elementary school that, the solution that one teacher has is the students that they're able to get online together. They are, obviously interacting in class sessions that way, but keeping in mind our FERPA obligations to not violate any student's privacy, we are considering recording those sessions so that someone that can't access it in the moment of can access it kind of in an on-demand type of format. And so when Tyler talks about us figuring this out and growing as we go, it's a good example of what that's looking like. Tyler, would you add anything to that from the high school level?
Yeah, I mean, we are right in the same boats. At first, I would say we were very, except for a few teachers, it was really traditional Google Classroom, online work, but still not in a video conference live session. That's growing for us. We actually have quite a few teachers that are starting to do these online, meet at 9 o'clock, Dave's example, and that is growing. And it's growing to the point where it's more teachers are doing some aspect of that than others. There are a lot of teachers that are recording themselves. I know, especially in the math department's doing a lot of pre-work, if you will, where they're working through a equation on, there's a app called Whiteboard where you can actually work through the problem so the kids can see it as you're writing, as if you have like a document camera or something like that, and then putting that out to video so the kids can see actually how the equation is solved. Our science department is working on labs. I know that Dr. Hasenauer has gone in and actually done a whole lab for kids and recorded himself so the kids can see that, and then gives them a data set they can work through. So that, long story short, yes, we are growing with that, and we're starting to use that more and more often.
Great. Any other questions? Thank you, Tyler.
Yeah.
Okay. Dave, do you want to jump into the staffing adjustment recommendations that you want to discuss with the board?
Yeah, happy to. So once again, this is linked in the report I gave you, but I also will kind of read through it just for the sake of our recorded meeting right now. So I shared staffing recommendations with the board that I'd like to ask you to consider for next year. And I'm not as much looking for board action on this as I'm looking for board direction on this. And I will, of course, comply with your direction. The gist of these recommendations is we are concerned about what the fiscal crisis is going to look like, and we have no idea of the details. We'll learn more every day, but we only know what we know right now, which is not much. So to try to anticipate as best as we can, you know that in the budget that was just approved by our voters, we had a number of things that we targeted specifically to meet our board goals, and we had some new positions that we have been preparing to hire. Some of those things that were new in terms of positions and expenses include pre-K district coordinator at 0.4 FTE, 3.0 increased school counselors across the whole district, a stipend for district arts coordinator, the addition of an in-school suspension position at Mill River, overhauls to garden spaces for instructional purposes at Shrewsbury and Mill River, incentives for bus driver CDL acquisition, and we had some athletic costs that are also shared with booster clubs, some costs related to uniforms and some leadership programs and trainings, et cetera. My recommendation to the board for consideration is the following. First, our pre-K program is in its infancy as an expanded program. And I believe that continuing with that coordinator position at 0.4 FTE is critical to our operation to be able to deliver that for our youngest children. So I recommend that stay on the books. And I actually do have a candidate that I'm ready to recommend to the board when the time is right. Obviously, that's not now, but we've got that figured out if we decide to proceed with that. I do recommend, even though there are significant needs and we would like to have them, I do recommend that we can hold off on the hiring of the 3.0 school counselors at this time. I recommend that we hold off on the district arts coordinator stipend. It's important to coordinate and align our K through 12 arts programs, but in light of where we are, it's my recommendation to hold off. Same recommendation for the in-school suspension staffing position at Mill River. It's important. It's a part of our goals, but given where we are, my recommendation is that we hold off. Because of the instructional components, I do recommend that we continue with the garden overhauls at Shrewsbury and Mill River and keep those costs planned to be expended. I recommend that we hold off on the bus driver CDL incentives, but I would like to come back to that momentarily. And I recommend that we continue with the athletic costs, partly because those are shared with our boosters, partly because that directly links to student activities. And I think that we should continue with that as planned. To give you the big picture on all of that, the new costs that were put into the budget totaled about $370,000. If we decided not to proceed with the things that I'm recommending we not proceed with, we save about $320,000 of those $370,000. So it takes those expenditures down by about $320,000 to a total of $50,000. The last thing I'd like to share before I ask you to engage in some conversation is I am making the recommendation that we hold off on the bus driver CDL incentives, but I need to articulate that Gary and I have significant concerns about transportation for next year in general. Those concerns are rooted in a number of areas. One, we have a commitment that we made to students from Ludlow that we will get a bus to them. We committed to that. We need to make that happen. So that's on the table as a part of our calculations. Second, if I'm speaking in generalities, much of the roster of our bus drivers are nearing or beyond retirement age. And so in light of COVID-19, in light of the dynamics of operating schools, we have no good sense of how many of our bus drivers will even be returning when we get up and running again. There's a legitimate concern there. The way those things would translate out if we're dealing with less drivers and needing to go to more places is that would significantly affect how we design routes. We would have to centralize routes even more. We would have to adjust stops even more because there's only so many hours in the day, and there's only so much time that we can justifiably have kids on board a school bus. So I need to just put that out there that regardless, we anticipate a problem on the horizon. Attracting new drivers is a significant focus of ours and is a focus that we have not had much luck with to this point, but that's a real and legitimate concern. Gary, is there anything that you would add to that topic beyond what I just shared?
No, I think you were pretty concise with it. I have noticed our drivers, when we were delivering the meals the first time around, to be almost skittish, if you will. Some of them were clearly concerned about their exposure risks. And we have had some conversations directly, and I've also heard some stories, if you will, about a few of them that are really this at a point where they're deciding they probably will not be joining us again next year, just because of their fears that this situation may still be occurring by the time school starts again for us. So it really is something that we just wanted to be sure we got in front of everyone, that it is a potential concern. We don't really know what's going to happen yet until they formally come out and say, yes, I'm coming back, or no, I'm not. Realizing with our bus drivers not being union members, they really, right up until the day they put the key in the ignition on that first day and start driving bus for us, I'm never really sure if they are coming back or not.
So with that, one more thing, just to recap for the group, there are 4 areas that I'm recommending we hold off on the expenditures for: school counselors, arts coordinator, in-school suspension staffing option, and bus driver CDL. So with that, I'd like to pause and just invite any conversation. And I saw BJ had a hand up. So BJ, would you like to start us off?
I would, but I also see Doug is now unmuted. If you want to
Hey,
go first.
Doug is back. Hi, Doug.
We
Doug,
can't hear
maybe.
you, Doug.
All right, we'll
Okay.
hope that Doug can hear us. BJ, go ahead.
Okay. I would like to understand. I mean, my first thing when I wrote down, when I heard,
we didn't do before.
I missed it.
Yeah,
You're still up, BJ.
Okay. I wrote down like when you started doing your list, even before you came to bus drivers, I said I was thinking that's something that needed to stay in the budget, the benefit for the CDL. Can you explain a little bit reason why you chose to keep it out, despite the fact that we really need them and it's been an ongoing problem?
Yeah, the only logic I have for keeping it out is, to this point, we have been unsuccessful with attracting potential bus drivers through a CDL incentive. So the thought was, based on our previous lack of success, it may be a good idea to free up that money and see what that looks like for the future. But that doesn't mean that's the right decision. That was just the logic behind why to potentially exclude it. I see John McKenna with a hand raised for a comment.
Well, I think that money could also be used for other means of attracting bus drivers, other advertising, other efforts, not just necessarily for incentives for existing employees to get CDLs. So I think it's going to be very important to keep that money in the budget as a placeholder thing having to do with trying to get bus drivers. I absolutely agree with you when you're talking about the demographics of our drivers with the COVID-19. There's also a lot of talk that even after we get through this particular phase of it, there could be another bump in 2 to 3 months, which would be right around the time when we're trying to start school back up again. So I think that's going to be a significant issue that we have to keep in mind, and that we should keep that money in the budget for anything having to do with attempting to get drivers.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, John. I see Gary's hand, and then George's hand, and then Andy's hand. So we'll go in that order. Gary.
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind about the incentive program is even if we today had somebody that wanted to become involved in that, it's a good 6 months out before that individual would have a bus endorsement. So that program really isn't going to do us any good in its current form for a situation that might be occurring come the 1st of September, if you will. So that's a longer lead issue for us at this point. John, you might be right. There might be other ways to spend some of that money in a different fashion to have something happen sooner.
Thanks, Gary. All right, we've got George, then Andy, and then Adrian after that. George, go ahead, and then Maria.
I guess I agree with John's approach to the subject. I think that we ought to have some money available to be assigned for you to use at your discretion in terms of helping our bus driver situation, whatever it might be, whether it's advertising, whether it's incentives that somebody's already got an endorsement to join us, thinking of retiring and would join us. So that's my view on it.
Okay, thank you, George. We have Andy, then Adrian, then Maria right now. Andy, go ahead.
I agree on the CDL money that it should be used any way we can to encourage bus drivers. But more importantly, overall on the recommendations, I don't agree with the items that have been picked. I think at this point, because so much is uncertain, we ought to freeze everything except the CDL money and wait till we get more information and have a much clearer idea of what's ahead of us. And unfortunately, I think these recommendations or freezing them may have to be just a very small piece of a much bigger and harder picture. So I'm reluctant to just take one piece now. I'd say freeze it and let's get more information.
Thank you, Andy. On to Adrian and then Maria.
I have to say that I actually agree with Andy. The number that I heard bandied about at the VSBA meeting just before this meeting was a $90 million shortfall in the ed fund. So somewhere that pain is going to be spread around.
Got it. And Maria. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Maria, on to you.
I see it's going to be hard. I'm concerned about cutting counselors because it seems like counselors are people that we're going to need more than ever to support teachers and to support the kids when they come back, because kids have been at home and some of them in really difficult situations, and they're going to need maybe more support and more helping figure things out. I know we're going to take a big hit, but I'm wondering, is there anything that we're saving on right now that we're not having schools, there's overhead that we're not actually spending.
Understood. So I'll tell you what, I saw Len's hand, and then let's go to Stan and Gary. They may have input on your savings question. We'll give them time to think for a moment. Maria. Len, what do you have, sir?
A couple of things. One question I have when we talk about athletics, is there any savings that'll take place because we don't have any spring sports in terms of officials and those kinds of things?
So at this moment, believe it or not, an official spring sports decision has not been made.
Okay.
The VPA and the athletic directors are making a decision April 30th that is going to be presumed to be a final decision about spring sports. I think we all have a sense on where that's going, but an official decision has not been made. I can share with you that the Superintendents Association took a stance that we believe that if there is a season, obviously we should pay for those things on a prorated basis. And of course, there will be officials and that type of thing. But if there's not a season, there will be some inherent savings built into that. Yes.
Okay. Just again, for clarification, when Andy and Adrian talked about freeze, does that mean not fund any of these? I guess I'm not clear on that.
I can't speak for Adrian or Andy, but that would be my interpretation of their meaning. Is that correct, Adrian and Andy? Go ahead, Andy. Or Andy saying thumbs up. Yes. Adrian, do you concur?
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying freeze for now. I mean, we just don't have enough information to proceed with the hires that we have listed. Or, I mean, it's just not sensible.
Back to you, Len.
Yeah. Okay. That I just wanted to clarify what that meant. And I guess the last thing I'll say is, from my perspective and agreeing with Maria, I really believe that we're going to need counselors. And I don't necessarily believe that we need, and this is coming from the person, if you remember, when we did the budget, who was opposed to the counselors. But I really believe that as the new year starts and we're looking at what help the students may need, I really think that counselors are going to be a key piece. The other part is, in looking down the road, when we're talking about the possibility of students coming from Mount Holly, in that terms of adjustment coming to Mill River. And you're also, again, this is my opinion, you're also going to be dealing with juniors who have sort of missed out on the end of this year, looking at going to need extra help in terms of applying for colleges and things like that. And so if I could fund anything, it would be for the extra counselor at Mill River.
Okay, thank you, Len. I saw John's hand, so let's go to John, and then Stan and Gary, I'm going to come to you on the question of any known savings related to being shut down for the moment. Go ahead, John.
So if it sounds an awful lot like we are going to be asked to cut money out of our budget. I think that's a foregone conclusion. It's easier to cut a position that has not been filled yet than it is to cut something else. And 80%, roughly 80%, Stan can tell me if my numbers are right or wrong, roughly 80% of our budget is people. So if we're going to cut anything, that's where the largest savings can be found. I'm not saying that's where it necessarily should be found, but that's where it can be found. And it will be easier to not fill a position than to try to get rid of one. I don't disagree with the need for counselors in any of the circumstances that you're talking about. We may just have to get a little creative in how we do it, maybe outsource it or use some other means. But I think it's almost certain that we're going to have to eliminate programs or eliminate something to reduce their budget. And that would seem to be the easiest place to do it.
Thank you, John. So just for clarification's sake for the group, main messages I'm hearing so far to inform your thinking is I'm hearing a range from we should freeze and not move on any of those new costs, some dialogue around keeping money for CDL incentives or bus driver incentives in general in the mix, and then a sentiment for keeping at least some degree of the counselor additions in the mix as well. So that seems to be the spectrum so far. Gary or Stan, anything you could share with us on perceived or real savings at the moment?
Well, we certainly are saving money associated with heat, electricity, those type of things. But realistically, how much, I don't know. Because how long have we actually been in this for at this point in time? It's only been actually a couple weeks. So I don't have a track record to be able to look back and say, yeah, we're saving about this much money every day. We certainly are saving money, but Stan, I don't know whether you've got any more data than that, but I don't have anything else to base an actual number on at this point.
How about you, Stan?
Yeah, we don't have enough data in regards to projecting where there are savings. I mean, like John had mentioned before, a good chunk of the budget is people. So that's pretty much set for the year, and there's not going to be any savings there. So we're just going to be saving, small items here and there, maybe 100,000 at best, something that's not going to be significant. Just one thing that you might want to keep in mind, the last time the education fund had a deficit, they did, an automatic cut of our education spending grant that was spread out over 2 years. So I wouldn't be surprised to see something like that down the road where, they do some sort of reduction over a 2 or 3 year phase.
I thank you, Stan and Gary. BJ, I see your hand with a question.
Yeah, 2 questions. First one I'm going to ask is, how long before we have to make this decision? Because I feel very uninformed about what our budget is going, what cuts we're going to have to make. And that may be, yes, let's not make a decision until we know more, like Adrian Andy says. I mean, do we have to make a decision now? Can we
No.
wait?
No, we're
No,
not warned for any sort of action tonight. This is just a discussion. Dave wanted some feedback. So we're not voting on this evening.
Correct.
And even if we were, had it as an agenda item based upon the uncertainty, I would think that we would want to put that off until we have some more concrete information from the state as to what the expectations may be and what the numbers are going to actually look like. So this is more just to inform Dave for this evening.
Yeah, I agree. And so BJ, let me piggyback on that. So we built these into the budget and the budget was approved. So theoretically, my folks are supposed to be working on filling these positions right now. So if there's any urgency, it comes down to, for example, school counselors. This is interviewing and hiring season. That doesn't mean we have to interview and hire right now. We have not begun that at all. And your conversation tonight gives me good signals for how we should proceed, which is not at all or very little at the moment is what I'm hearing. So whatever clarity I get from the board tonight just helps us with the concept of pressing pause. The board could take action and say, Dave, we don't want you to do these at all. Or you could just advise me like you're doing now and say, yeah, there's no rush on these. Let's wait and see. And then my folks just don't move on the interviewing and hiring and filling of a lot of these.
Okay, and then I want to follow that up though. The early ed director person,
The pre-K, yep.
the pre-K. I know that is a brand new program. I don't think that's going away and kind of required of us. Can you speak to your decision to try and keep that as part of a thing, as part of, like, besides the fact that it sounds like you already have someone lined up to possibly get the position?
Yeah.
Other
Yeah.
reasons why you think that is something we really should be looking at, over even some of the counselors, which is obvious we'll need.
Yeah, BJ, if you asked me to pick the one thing in this list that we should keep, it would be that. And that's regardless of the fact that I think we found the right person for it. The reason is the pre-K programming and doing the expansion we did filled a significant community need. And we knew that because our programs filled up immediately. We were tapped out from the get-go. The challenge of pre-K is it's a really complex regulatory environment. There are multiple agencies at the state level involved, and there are a lot of legal logistics that go into that that have to happen at the building level. And the way we're currently constructed, that pulls time away from both principals and pre-K teachers to have to manage the billing, have to manage a lot of the data tracking pieces. And you might say to yourself, well, hey, why can't someone at the district level just handle that? It's because we have to designate people for each individual site to be the overseers of that unless we've got someone to coordinate it. So in really simple terms, the regulatory construct of running our pre-K programs is really cumbersome. So having someone whose eyes would be on dealing with the state, dealing with the legal stuff, doing some mentoring and support, but taking a lot off the plates of the teachers and principals is probably the most important position on that list in my mind at this specific juncture in time. So if you ask me what's the one thing that we need to hold on to at this juncture, I would say that would be the one. And then my next response to that would be counselor role or roles. And I'm definitely sensitive to the importance of the bus driver issue as well. That would be kind of my priority list if you ask me to make one.
Any other questions for Dave?
I see George's hand. Yes, sir.
I've been sitting here stewing, listening to all the conversation, and I guess I'm going to throw my opinion in with Andy and Adrian on the let's be careful and freeze everything if we have to sooner than later, depending on what we learn in the next few days.
Any other comments or questions on that?
No, no.
Len, are you waving your hand there?
Yes, I am.
Yes.
I don't have an issue with waiting to make decisions. I think my interpretation, and I'll go back to why I asked that question about freezing. My interpretation of freezing is that we weren't going to do these, and that was the decision that was being made. And I don't agree with that decision. I agree we need to wait and see what kinds of things happen. And while I expressed my opinions of what I felt should be funded, I'm wide open to waiting and seeing what is going to happen. And I understand the hiring process, but I think given the situation that we're in, there's a lot of people that are going to be in limbo in terms of the hiring process and job searching and all of those kinds of things. So I think I'm not as concerned about that as maybe we would have been in the past.
Thank you, Len. So Andy, go ahead, sir.
I will reiterate again or clarify what I mean by freezing, and that is, as you use the word, Len, is to put a hold on it.
Okay.
I'm quite convinced that we are going to be looking at a much bigger picture with many more pieces, and I want all those pieces to fit together. So we make a final decision, it's comprehensive and not piecemeal. So hold everything or freeze it at the moment. We'll get more information, and I bet we'll have a much bigger plan.
So I think,
Thank you.
Yeah, Andy just captured the spirit of what my takeaway from tonight is. So first, I think this conversation is very good for the board to have in a public forum like this. We need to start discussing these things, and you giving my team some direction about how to proceed is important. And I think the logical move right now is we press pause. We do not have to hurry to do anything. We wait for some clarity that will give administration and the board a sense of what the future may look like, and we can make decisions down the road. So we will press pause as of right now, and we can revisit this as often as is necessary or appropriate, if that works for the board.
Excellent. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, everyone.
I think that Stan has our auditor contract for us next on the agenda. Stan, are you with us?
Yeah. Yeah, presenting a 3-year contract with our current auditors, R.H.R. Smith. Again, it's for 3 years, and it's about a 2.7%, overall increase from the last contract we signed with them 3 years ago. And so I would recommend the board to make a motion to accept the contract.
Okay, is there who will make that motion for me?
I will do that. George speaking.
Thank you. Who will second it?
Lenny can second it.
Thank you, Len. Any discussion? Any questions for Stan? Comments? Anyone? Hearing none, we'll do the vote. So, George has a question.
Just was going to suggest to Stan that before we, maybe he'd do a final negotiation on the increase in terms of seeing if they will be generous in any way. That's all.
Okay.
So then we will proceed with the vote. So first, DJ.
Aye.
Thank you. Maria.
Aye.
Thank you. Len.
Aye.
Thank you. Andy.
Aye.
Thank you. George.
Yes.
Thank you. Doug.
Aye.
Thank you.
You got me back, huh?
Yay. Adrian.
Thank God for 23-year-old daughters, I'll tell you that.
Adrian votes aye.
Thank you. John.
Aye.
Thank you. So the compact is approved. Thank you, Stan. Do you need anything else for us?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. So we're going to move on to now our committee business. So basically, we want to check in with everybody as we go through and see if you've given any thought, chairs of your committee, how you might go forward in this brave new world that we're experiencing, hopefully temporarily more than anything else. So Len, you're up first, personnel.
Sure. Thanks a lot. um, I I really haven't, and partially because I haven't even been back there. But we would have scheduled um, the next personnel committee for the first meeting in May. But I don't think we need to set that up yet, particularly if we're not going to be looking at filling these positions immediately. Then our best bet is probably to hold off on that, and that way we can adjust and set up a meeting as we need it, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. Any other input from personnel? Questions for Len?
Len, do we want to continue work with the
Evaluation. The difficulty with the evaluation is we were scheduling to meet face to face with individuals. And given the situation we're in right now, I'm not so sure how well that would work. I'm not going to give up on it. I just think we need to, and I'll need to talk to Maria and Tammy. We need to rethink, and with this format that we're using tonight, that may be the way that we need to go to finish it up.
Okay. That answer your question, BJ?
Yeah. I have had oddly more contact time with teachers than I ever have. People. So it's an interesting change.
Hey, thank you. Hey, George, you're up next. Policy.
Actually, I'm passing it back to BJ.
No, welcome to my first
Oh,
one
that's
as
right.
policy chair.
Oh my goodness, Jay.
So I would like to report nothing has been done, and we have chose to cancel until further notice.
Okay.
Actually, a lot of this with so many things going on in the background. I will say that I did reach out to David to say, is there anything in policy that you're concerned about with all these changes? He said he has not run into anything. I'm going to say I'd like the idea of taking a bit of a pause and letting things settle down enough. And then once that does, I think we'll pick up, and I think there will be several things that are highlighted that may have came up that we need to readdress. So unless, David, do you have anything along that line, since I'm new and getting guidance? Okay.
I have nothing to add, BJ. Thanks.
Oh,
George.
have something to
Yeah.
add?
Just a quick follow-up. Shortly after our reorganization meeting, BJ reached out to me in terms of some questions on policy. I have not returned to his request, but I will, so be patient, BJ.
Yeah, I'm known for missing the mark a few times too, so.
Thank you. And I'll try
Thank you very much.
make that note right here so I don't make that mistake again. Sorry about that. Negotiations, Adrian.
We are sort of on hold at the moment, waiting for the financial implications of COVID. And on a statewide basis, there's been more than one district that has had their teachers association reach out to them with a request to have a placeholder to possibly reopen work conditions language in the contracts. I don't know of anybody who's actually asked for the contracts to be open yet, but they want to keep that with a placeholder. And that's about it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Adrian, anybody? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. John, buildings and grounds.
So I think buildings and grounds is fairly narrow focused right now with keeping the building clean and following along behind people as they come in and out. My only thought is that Gary have a resource if he needs it. Otherwise, I think we're going to put a hold on our meetings as well until things become a little bit clearer. If there's anything that Gary feels he needs support for, we will be there for him, whether it's buildings and grounds or even transportation with drivers if he needs that assistance. Otherwise, we'll be holding off.
Oh, great. Any questions? Doug? No? Okay. And then we'll move on to Maria, community engagement. Maria, are you there?
She's trying to unmute, I think.
There. So as promised, I have a draft community engagement plan for the board, and I'm sorry I didn't get it to you before the meeting, but I did get it to Anne, so it will go along with the minutes. So I won't get into it right now, but if you could all read it and send feedback, that would be great. We haven't met since we last were able to meet in person, but I'm expecting that if we can get some feedback from the rest of you in the next week, that hopefully we'll be able to meet the week after that, but remotely. And I'm wondering, Ryan, do we have a system for how committees are going to meet remotely if we want to? Is this what we should be following?
Brian, did you hear that question directed to you?
He may not even be on there. I'll jump in here because this has been my life for the past 2 weeks. I do believe you guys are settling a little bit on Google Meet, and they're very easy to set up. Basically, Maria, just set up a calendar event, and once you do that, you can check to add a meeting like this. The only thing you have to keep in mind is people who are coming in from the outside who do not have a Mill River Schools domain, you will have to click approve. So
there's not usually a competition for coming.
Who's that strange guy on the screen right there?
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, BJ.
BJ.
Thanks, Maria. We will look for that and get you some feedback in the next week. Maybe could you possibly after this meeting tomorrow, maybe sometime, just send everybody an email, like formally requesting that so that it's in the forefront of everyone's mind?
I was intending to do that too. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So now we move on to Andy and the Finance Committee.
There. Well, up until about a day and a half ago, I was saying there was no need for the Finance Committee to meet until late June, as we always do. But that has suddenly changed. I'm sure the Finance Committee will be meeting. I will, after the webinar, any other information we get, be conferring with Dave and Stan and Tammy, and then have a sense of where we are, what we need to do, and we will call a committee meeting and go from there. So everybody stay tuned. Now, I get to do the numbers. I have them over here. So these are the pay orders, and they are dated March 31st, 2020, from the general fund, $11,230. Try that one again, $11,239.09. That is the only pay order there. So the total is $11,239.09. Now, wait a second. I will go over to payroll. And they are as follows. On March 13th, 2020, winter coaches, the total of $32,341.07. March 13th, regular payroll, $454,182.63. March 16th, regular payroll, $4,970.59. March 27th, 2020, regular payroll, $441,231.37. Finally, on April 1st, 2020, regular payroll, $3,112.76. The total of these payrolls is $935,838.42. I move the pay orders and payroll be approved as read.
I'll second, George.
Thank you, George. Any discussion? George, Doug?
Well, I haven't had a chance to review anything for quite a few days. I'm sure Doug probably hasn't either. But what I was curious about is that if Stan, do you have a group working every day or often in terms of the finances, or Karen to email us just the, what do you call it, the register that shows things item by item, versus we don't need to see the invoices or any of that stuff in terms of being able to review the pay orders. Now, in terms of the payroll, unless somebody's going to sneak a strange name in there, I don't necessarily need to review that because it's pretty well set in terms of the budget. So I'd be happy to do it that way if that's something that folks would like to have happen.
Input from anybody? That's kind of what we did with the last one. I believe that Karen emailed everything over, and I saw it, and I believe you and Doug both saw it also.
Yeah, can I talk, Tammy?
Yes, Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, Stan sent us around some of the A's that we had and some of the ones some we went through. It's kind of interesting to see it on the little screen as it was under the big piece of paper. I didn't find anything I thought was a problem. Seemed to be well in line. Every time I see a 8 or 9 digit number in there, I get a little nervous. There was one of those there this time, but seems to be okay with me as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, and you're good, Doug, with working with George and continuing to review it that way?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that at all.
Great, thank you both. Is there any other discussion with regard to the pay orders or the payroll before we vote? Hearing none, we will go through. And BJ, may I have your vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So the pay orders and the payroll are approved as read. And I presume, Stan, that Karen will transmit the sign-off sheet like she did last time? Or do I have it ready? Is that here? Oh, yes. Look, I can just sign that and send it back then. Will that
Yep,
work?
great. Yep, great.
Okay, I will do that. And then we will go on to George's favorite part of the meeting, transact other legal business. George, do you have anything for us?
Oh, yes, I do. I'm looking for any interested board members in joining me in a partnership. I'm going to start up a new manufacturing company because apparently there's a big market for toilet tissue. So I figured we'd start manufacturing toilet tissue and put it out as a fundraiser for the school.
So many puns we could go with there, George, but we won't do it.
Well, it's a very popular item. I mean, people are really tearing it up.
Any other legal business to discuss?
I have 2 questions, if I could, please.
Sure, Doug.
Question number 1, the sign sheets for the pay orders and stuff, are they going to be available at the school, or they're coming to us, or how's that working?
They're attached to the attachment that Anne attached to the meeting warning that lists the payroll.
Okay.
So if you can sign yours and I can sign mine where indicated and get that back, would that work, Stan?
Okay, that'll work. That'll work for me.
That's perfect.
Question 2 is for Dave. I know it's a lot premature and there's so much going on. I'm having a concern in my mind.
May the 8th. Separate from that, our Mill River administration and staff are figuring out what do we do to honor and recognize these seniors who have been cheated from the last few months of their normal school experience. So that thinking and brainstorming is in the works right now, but we do not have a plan yet, other than we know that a graduation date will be June 10th, and we have no idea what that might look like at that time.
Yeah, that sounds good. Keep me in mind if there's any questions or any meetings going on to talk to. I'd like to tell these kids that they put 15 years into learning this stuff. Everybody telling them what to do, and this is their chance to do what they want. I can't have them going out without have something for them. That's for sure.
Understood completely. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Anyone else?
BJ, is that a voting member you got there?
Yeah, he is.
Agenda building. We're not having a meeting next week, Dave. Am I correct? Because
Yeah, correct. A while back, we had moved next week's meeting to the 22nd of April. If you asked just my personal opinion, we probably could get away with not doing that meeting on the 22nd and doing the meeting that is scheduled for Wednesday, March 6th. I think we could probably manage a one-a-month schedule right now. I'm sorry, May 6th, not March. We could probably manage that. However, if the board would like to meet more frequently in light of not knowing what financial dynamics may be out there, it might be wise to go ahead and meet on the 22nd. We could go either direction that the board wants to.
okay, any input from that? What say you all?
My vote would be to Andy and Dave to make a decision regarding and calling a meeting if necessary.
Fair.
Anyone else? Does that sound good to everybody? We'll plan
Yeah.
on a 6th meeting unless we hear otherwise. I see lots of head shaking. So
That
all right.
works.
Okay. And what will we do? I will have some an update, central office reports in some format. Yes, for that meeting.
Yeah, so I mean, we could try to mirror what we normally do. We could do some central office reports. We could have principals on board to give you just some, in-person updates like you're used to. We could try to keep this as standard as possible.
Yeah, I think hearing from the principals, I think personally, I would like to hear from each of them as to what's going on. By then, we'll be more than a month into the remote learning, and it might be interesting to hear from everybody and see what challenges and successes they have to talk about.
You bet. Can do.
Okay, and then I'm sure that we may have a finance piece by then. Maybe that would be sufficient, unless you have anything else that we need to address.
Nothing else from me.
Anyone else have anything to add?
I see no hands.
Okay, so then we will, I don't want to make us vote to adjourn, so can we just agree to adjourn by consensus so we don't have to go through a roll call? Does that sound good to everybody?
I see lots of thumbs up and head nods. I think you're all clear, Tammy.
Okay, thank you all. With your help, we made it through, I think, pretty darn good for our first attempt at this. So thank you all for joining us and sticking it out and dealing with me having to call everybody out one by one. So thank you all. Have a good night. Thank you.
Night.
Well done,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
How do I shut this off?